With playoff implications continuing, and finally having an overtime game for the first time this season for the XFL, we had a great slate of football over this Easter weekend. Hey, how's it going? Hope your holiday weekend was great as we are recapping what happened in the XFL. So if you like these type of videos, please hit the like button to let YouTube know that you're enjoying the content that you're watching. So let's talk about it. To start the week, we had a big game in the XFL North Division as St. Louis would host the Vegas Vipers in a rematch from Week 6. This time though, both teams would have different starting quarterbacks, as a MVP candidate this year, AJ McCarron, would be out for this game with a shoulder injury. And the Vipers' new quarterback, Jalen McClendon, seems like the guy over there from last week's performance. Vegas would score twice in the first half with a touchdown in their first drive that was set up by a great kickoff return. McClendon and Lovett would dominate the ground for their first touchdown, which is what seemed to be the game plan for the Vipers in this game, as they'd have 208 rushing yards total. Vegas would botch the second chance for a touchdown as the center would snap the ball over the head of McClendon, which would push them back from the 1 yard line, ending up with a field goal instead. Vegas would soon mess up again on the final seconds of the first half because for some reason Rod Woodson decided to go for a fake field goal when they should have clearly just taken the points to extend the lead. St. Louis, while struggling early on, would score a touchdown in the second quarter with a pass from backup quarterback Nick Tiano to Hakeem Butler for 32 yards, making the score 11-8 with a John Elway helicopter 2-point conversion at halftime from Tiano. The third quarter was basically the destroying show, as they had him on to basically talk ball, and it was okay, other than the crowd was really loud for a majority.
Man, it is so loud. I'm sorry, guys. I'm hearing a lot of crowd noise right now.
Back to Bird on the ground. Good cut. Up the middle to the... Come on now.
Okay, Battle Hawks.
McClendon feeling the pressure. Gets out of the pressure. McClendon does take off.
Things got really interesting in the fourth quarter as it was a turnover galore, with Vegas turning it over first as a sack turned interception by the big fella LaCale London, but Tiano would be picked off immediately by Maurice Smith in the end zone the next drive. Then, after a St. Louis Brian Hill fumble that would set up a McClendon passing touchdown off a jailbreak screen to Geronimo Allen for 27 yards. Then, when everything felt like the worst for St. Louis after punting the ball away with 5 minutes left, but then would fool everyone with a Pat McAfee-like throw from the punter to wide receiver Gary Jennings, outrunning the entire special teams unit for a massive 64-yard touchdown to get them back in it. Then they would get the ball back to end up kicking a field goal to tie it up for the first overtime of the season. In overtime, the rules are of course going to be different from the NFL in sense that instead of the one touchdown and win scenario, which has screwed over many teams in the past, the XFL rules involve a lot of the NCAA rules, as it's a shootout red zone scenario where each team will have 3 alternating tries from the 5-yard line to score. Though in the XFL, if the offense has a penalty, their try is going to be no good. And if the defense gets a penalty, the offense would get a retry if they wanted. Whoever has the most points after those 3 tries win the game. And if it's still a tie after those 3 tries, they'll keep going until there is a winner. I was very excited to see how the overtime rules would play out, and I was not disappointed, as the rules were immediately presented as Vegas would fail on an attempt because of either an offensive penalty or not making it in general. St. Louis would end up winning in overtime with a pass to Hakeem Butler and a rushing score from Brian Hill to get a big win at home. Up next, we have the Renegades with their new starting quarterback, former Viper Luis Perez, traveling over to play the Guardians after their massive upset win against DC. With Orlando already being eliminated from playoff contention, the rest of the games don't really mean much except for morale victories to be proud of as a team. All in all, this was a defensive game throughout, as in the first quarter after both offenses scored field goals, the Renegades defense was able to get a scoop and score after a Quentin Dormady scramble. DB Devontae Bosby was able to be the one to get the scoop and score. Dormady would be able to respond off that turnover with a rushing touchdown, with the quarterback sneak continuing his amazing performance from last week. Dormady this week, though, struggled, with him turning the ball over 5 times compared to his 6 touchdown performance last week. those struggles would continue as the Guardians offense would continue not being able to move the ball. Arlington would take advantage with a physical ground and pound drive, topping it off with a Devian Smith touchdown on the goal line, recording his 5th touchdown of the season. Orlando would get the ball back with a little over 6 minutes left in the game, and Dormady would march down the field to throw a catch and run dump route to Eli Rogers for 17 yards, trying to make a comeback. Then, with one more chance to win, Arlington would get a sack fumble on Quinton Dormady to end the game as the defense would recover and seal the win for the Renegades, keeping their playoff hopes alive. On Sunday, we started with Houston clinching a playoff berth after beating San Antonio in a close defensive showdown. San Antonio seems to be in the same spot as Vegas and Orlando as they're trying to get morale victories just to finish the season. Houston would start Brandon Silvers again after back-to-back losses with Cole McDonald in, and he'd start out hot with a touchdown on the first drive to wide receiver Deontay Burnett on the goal line. B. Silvers would get his second touchdown after an interception from D lineman Trevon Mason, setting up a play action to fullback Garrett Owens on the goal line. San Antonio, on the other hand, was struggling throughout, with Jack Cohn starting at the quarterback spot, missing some key passes and throwing bad picks, including one to William Likely while trying to get into scoring positions. San Antonio would be able to tie it up with the final minute of the game after a huge interception from Brandon Silvers throwing to Cameron Kelly to give the Brahmas offense a great opportunity after a defensive PI and a Jaquise Patrick touchdown from the 1-yard line. Then, after a field goal to tie it up, we'd go into overtime for the second time in 1 week. In overtime, it was a defensive shootout as both fronts were able to shut down each other's offenses until B. Silvers would throw a dime to Deontay Burnett to win the overtime shootout and clinch a playoff berth for the XFL South. To finish off the weekend, we had a Week 1 rematch as 2 of the top 3 teams in the XFL North Division would play to determine who's taking that number 1 spot in the division. Both teams in this one have significantly changed since that Week 1 game, as Seattle has had 4 straight wins and DC's offensive identity has changed to more of a balanced offensive attack on the ground and the air, with Jordan Ta'amu establishing himself as a top quarterback. Ta'amu and the Defenders' offense would score twice in the first half, with Abram Smith pounding it in for the first score after a huge pass from Ta'amu. Then the second one was a touchdown pass from Jordan Ta'amu to backup running back Raquel Armstead off a Texas route to the end zone. But Seattle was not going to back down from the Defenders as they'd keep fighting the whole game, responding with a Philip Lindsay rushing touchdown, getting his first touchdown in the XFL, making the score 16-6 at halftime. DC looked to pull things away as the offense would score off their first drive, ending with a great placed ball from Jordan Ta'amu to tight end Alex Ellis, extending their lead 22-6. But after Seattle would get a 2-point play on the defense, getting a scoop and score, the Sea Dragons would keep fighting back, and Ben DiNucci would throw a nice ball down the seam, splitting the defense to wide receiver Jawan Green for 46 yards, connecting for their first touchdown of the day. Then, after a Seattle field goal starting the fourth quarter, we had a shootout to finish the game off as both teams didn't want to give up that number 1 spot, starting with Jordan Ta'amu scoring another touchdown through the air raid attack. Seattle would get another bomb of a pass from DiNucci to Jawan Green for 56 yards, continuing that connection from quarterback Ben DiNucci as he makes a wild, lucky 3-point conversion to make the score 28-27. After that, though, DC would respond with their own big play from Jordan Ta'amu as he shoots a great dump pass to wide receiver Chris Blair for a catch and run for 70 yards. But Seattle would stay in it with another great touchdown from Ben DiNucci as he'd sling it to Jacour Pearson for a big-time touchdown for 14 yards. Sadly, the game would abruptly end with Seattle failing on a 2-point conversion, trying to win it all and not go into overtime, which, looking at it now, wasn't a good choice, with the Defenders reading the attempt like a book, basically. DC would go on to win a huge game 34-33 against the Sea Dragons to guarantee themselves a playoff berth. Alright, so now that we've discussed about what happened over week 8 of the XFL season, let's move on to week 9 with the Vegas Vipers traveling over to play the Houston Roughnecks. Now, in this game, I'm going to take the Roughnecks solely based off of their home field advantage because last week, offensively, they did not look at their best, even with Brandon Silvers out there. So hopefully with another week of Brandon Silvers back starting at the quarterback position for the offense, hopefully the Roughnecks will be able to get things going against Jalen McClendon and the Vegas Vipers. Moving on to the Orlando Guardians playing the San Antonio Brahmas. This game doesn't really mean anything except for just morale, victory for the teams. I'm basically just going to take Orlando here because I like what they have going since Quentin Dormandy has been the quarterback there, even though this last week he struggled. I'm going to take Orlando to win. Moving on to the Arlington Renegades traveling over to play the DC Defenders. For the very first time this season, they play each other, and I'm going to take DC because they have the better team. They do. Jordan Ta'amu most likely is going to win the MVP award, in my opinion, if I had to choose, based off of how he's performed this year as the quarterback for the Defenders, and I just don't see the Renegades winning. But then again, I said that for the Guardians, so we'll see. Moving on to the last game of Week 9, which is the Seattle Sea Dragons, coming off of their loss against DC, traveling over to play the St. Louis Battlehawks, who just came off of their win without starting quarterback A.J. McCarron. So with that, and the Battlehawks are going to be playing at home for this game, I'm going to take the St. Louis Battlehawks unless the Sea Dragons can get things going again on defense and figure things out offensively. In a packed stadium like St. Louis, because the Battlehawks seem to play at their best whenever they're at that stadium. Alright, so that's going to be the video this week covering the XFL from week 8 to week 9. If you enjoyed what you watched today, please hit the like button so you let YouTube know that you were enjoying the content that you're watching. Also, please hit the subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about the XFL so far, and hope you guys have a good one.